Hey everybody, welcome to our new Patricia Polacco book. This week we're going to be spending time with this amazing text called Mrs. Katz and Tush. It's the story of an unlikely friendship, and it's a beautiful story, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to share it with you over 3 different episodes. So this is episode 1 of our time with Mrs. Katz and Tush, which is about an unlikely friendship and the beauty of that unlikely friendship. And in this book, we're going to be learning about some Jewish traditions, and we're going to have a chance to understand a little bit more about some holidays and traditions that Jewish people celebrate. I know I have some friends out there who could help me with more detail about these traditions, so feel free to respond if you have any feedback. Mrs. Katz and Tush. Larnell didn't know Mrs. Katz very well, but almost every other day his mother stopped in to see her after work. Since her husband died, she's so alone, his mother had told him. Mrs. Katz held tight to his mother's hands that day, and they looked into an old photo album. "That's my husband Myron," said Mrs. Katz. "He came from Poland like me a long time ago. We had such a life, such a life." Then her voice broke. "We had no children, and I'll be all alone for Hanukkah and Passover." Then she cried. The next day, Larnell stopped in to see her himself. "I've been thinking," he said. "A cat had some kittens in the basement of our building. We found someone to take all of them except this one. She's the runt. Nobody wants her because she's so ugly. She doesn't even have a tail." "Ugly, you say?" Mrs. Katz said. "My Myron was ugly too when he was little, but he grew up to be such a person." Mrs. Katz looked at the little kitten. "Scrawny little booble, so small, no tail," she said as she examined the kitten closely. "I don't know," she said doubtfully, and then she saw the look on Larnell's face. "Larnell, I'll take her," she announced, "but only if you come by and help me with her. I've never had a cat before." Larnell promised. "A good Yiddish name I'll give her," said Mrs. Katz. "Let's see. She has no tail, and all you see is her tush. That's it. We'll call her Tush." Little Tush grew healthy and strong. Mrs. Katz cooked for her, brushed her, knitted toys for her, and even read to her. "Such a person," she'd say as she watched Tush play. Mrs. Katz was in love. Larnell kept his promise. He visited Mrs. Katz and Tush every day after school. There was always a fresh-baked kugel and a tall glass of milk waiting for him. But as much as he grew to love Tush, he also loved to listen to Mrs. Katz talk about the old country and the way times used to be. "I come from Warsaw, that's in Poland, you know. I came here to work sewing dresses in the garment district for my cousin, Moisha." I want to just pause here and say, you are experiencing, or you just did last week, you experienced the book called Brave Girl, all about the garment district. So I want you to imagine what it would be like for one of those garment district workers to grow up and many, many years later be an older person and to be sharing their experience of working in the garment district. I'm happy you have that background knowledge in your memory bank so you can kind of pull up what your understanding might be about the context with which Mrs. Katz came to the United States. just like the young girl and brave girl who came from overseas and came to the United States for opportunity and a better life, they have that parallel. So I hope you're thinking about that right now. I didn't speak a word of English. Then how did you talk to people? Asked Larnell. I didn't, she answered. A lot, and I cried in those days. Until I met Myron. He asked me to marry him after he tasted my kugel. Kugel is a Jewish pastry. It's very delicious. I believe that, Larnell said as he ate some. Myron and I used to vacation in the Catskills. A borscht resort. You know, a place for Jews to stay. You mean Jews couldn't stay anywhere they wanted to? Larnell asked. Makes me think of the civil rights era and the white-only signs. Doesn't it make you feel like that too? Did you know that there were also discriminatory rules that kept Jewish people from accessing different services like hotels and resorts and going to certain places in a similar way that African Americans were discriminated against? Mrs. Katz didn't answer. Instead, she went to a trunk and pulled out some old clothes. My grandma told me about places that she couldn't stay either, Larnell said softly. So Larnell sounds like he knows something about that discrimination that happened for African American people as well. Larnell, your people and mine are alike, you know. Trouble, we've seen. Happiness, too. Great strength we've had. You and I are alike, so much alike. Isn't that interesting? Mrs. Katz is drawing similarities between herself and Larnell, even though on the outside they seem so different. But there are so many ways that they connect. Now, where was I? Oh, yes, I was at the Catskills. We used to dress every Sunday and have a costume ball, said Mrs. Katz. Then she put on a record on the record player. It was old and scratched. You hear that, Larnell? She said. That is what we used to dance to. It's a dance from my homeland. Here, I'll show you. They whirled and danced around the room, laughed and giggled. All right, friends, that's the first part of our experience with Mrs. Katz and Tush. We're going to come back for 2 more episodes, but here's what's new this week. Our story time is now connected to our ELA focus lesson. So after you watch this video, go to your ELA focus lesson and you'll find a specific question to answer about this first section of Mrs. Katz and Tush. See you next time.